Welcome to the Debrief. I'm Donna King. I'm editor-in-chief of Carolina Journal. Our team here today to fill you in on everything that's been happening this week. We've already started talking about the debates and everything. There's a lot going on this week. Joining us, of course, Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation and Carolina Journal reporters Teresa Opeka and Katie Zender. Okay, a lot going on. First, let's talk about House Bill 10. Mitch, I'm going to start with you. The North Carolina General Assembly has passed this. It's got a lot to it. Tell me a little bit about what this means for opportunity scholarships.
Yes, this was the General Assembly coming back to town to deal with some of the things that were hanging out from the last session, one of which was funding for opportunity scholarships and clearing up this backlog that we knew about, because there were many more families that applied for opportunity scholarships, which are the vouchers for private school tuition, and many more applied for them than there was money available. We had heard through much of the summer that the General Assembly was going to clear up the backlog, make sure that everyone who applied for the scholarship would be able to get one. And then they didn't. Yeah. They left town without dealing with this issue, and there were a lot of families that either had to decide, okay, I can't take this private school option, I'm going to have to stay with the traditional public school, or they said, we'll go ahead and take the private school option and hope that the General Assembly will come back later and give us the money. What happens with this bill is that the funding is there now to cover that backlog. I think this will be something when the legislators come back in 2025 that they will probably revisit. Do they have enough money to cover all of the demand for opportunity scholarships going forward? But for families who have been wanting the General Assembly to do something about this, as long as this stands, as long as, we'll probably get into what Roy Cooper's going to do, but as long as it survives the rest of the process, that will be good news.
All right, so one of the things I do want to talk about is what this means for universal school choice. Puts North Carolina in a really unique position in the country, doesn't it?
It really does, and we've been talking about universal school choice in North Carolina for a while, ever since the General Assembly took off the money requirements that were related to opportunity scholarships and said that anyone could apply. The problem is they called it universal school choice, but they didn't have the funding in place for universal school choice. And the way that it still works out is that the money goes first to families with the lowest amount of income, which is how the program was initially designed and what you would expect. If you've got a limited pot of money, the money should go first to the families that need it the most. And as it's designed now, those families with the lowest amount of income can get a larger scholarship than higher income families. But the idea behind universal school choice was any family should be able to apply for this and get money for it, even if it's less money because they have a higher amount of income and could cover more of the bill themselves. So it is good for North Carolina to now be in the position that you not only are saying you have universal school choice, but you have the money to back it up.
Sure. Now, House Bill 10 actually did more than just that. It was sort of a cleanup bill of lots of things that are priorities, especially as we head into a November election. What else is in there, Katie?
Right, so one of the big things is ICE. So this bill actually requires sheriffs to work with ICE.
Immigration's customs enforcement.
Yes. So local law enforcement has to notify ICE when an undocumented suspect is about to be released from custody. Now this only applies to serious crimes, violent misdemeanors. It does not apply to minor infractions such as driving without a license. And there was a lot of misconceptions both in the House Rules Committee and on the House floor about what actually this bill does. So all it does is require law enforcement to notify ICE. It gives them 48 hours to hold the suspect for ICE to come take custody of them for deportation.
Okay, all right. So that now will go to Governor Cooper because it's passed both the Senate and the House?
Yes, correct. It passed the Senate on Monday, I believe, 27-17. Passed the House 67-43, I believe. Yes, and so it's going to go to Governor Cooper's desk, and then, we'll see what happens.
Absolutely, Katie.
One other thing that's important to mention about that is that we're talking, this is applying to sheriffs across the state, the 100 sheriffs, and it really only applies to a handful who weren't cooperating with ICE.
10%.
So the majority were.
It was only 10% that weren't cooperating, so 90 out of 100 counties were already doing this voluntarily.
All right, so 10%, are those mostly falling in urban or rural areas? Who
so
are those 10%?
I'm not sure of the geographic demographic, but I do know that those that weren't complying were doing so out of a fear that they would be held legally responsible by the judge for not complying with the order. So this bill ensures that they won't be legally liable for not complying complying with the order.
One was Gary McFadden from
Okay.
Mecklenburg
Yes.
County.
Yeah.
Mecklenburg County.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're mainly the large urban
Yeah.
counties where
Okay.
they've elected Democrats, some of whom ran on a campaign that we're not going to work with ICE.
Right.
So this was actually part of the political campaign over the past couple of cycles that some Democrats running for sheriff said, we're not going to cooperate with the feds on this, and that was what helped them win their elections. And that's one of the reasons the General Assembly said, no, everyone should
Right.
be complying with this, the feds who are trying to get these dangerous people off the streets.
Sure, and that's a sanctuary city.
Right,
We hear a
exactly.
lot of talk about sanctuary cities. That meant that the local sheriff was not cooperating.
Exactly.
Very interesting. What do we think that Governor Cooper is going to do?
Like he's, why break a streak, right?
Okay,
I think
sure.
he's going to actually veto it.
Has he come out and spoken about this ICE and Opportunity Scholarships?
The Opportunity Scholarships, he actually had a press conference last week. You know,
Okay.
he said, well, he's not against private schools. In fact, one of his daughters went to private school.
Right.
He doesn't feel like they should be taking the funding away from public schools because public schools have so many needs right now. But there's a problem with that is that public schools are being funded separately in the budget from,
Okay.
the Opportunity Scholarships.
So Opportunity Scholarships is a different funding stream.
Yes.
Oh, very
So, but
interesting.
and eventually, most likely it'll be overridden by the supermajority. So,
Okay.
that's how it's going to play out. But yeah, he was, and that's been his
MO.
his MO the last how
Sure.
many months, how many years. Still, the education funding state of emergency is still up on his
It's
website.
still up there,
So I
okay.
mean, hey,
Yeah, we'll watch closely.
Yeah, it's not a hurricane, but it's But
Sure. Katie, do you think they have the votes for an override?
I think they do.
Okay.
Yes, and another thing that this bill does is it appropriates $280,000 for DHHS to hire 2 full-time jail inspectors.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good. We'll be paying really close attention over the next few days about this, and we'll certainly keep you informed if this continues. If you're an Opportunity Scholarship family on that wait list, stay tuned because you may be getting that coverage. So I got to go to the presidential debate. I mean, really, that was so interesting. It's really tightened the race at the top of the ticket here in North Carolina, which is really interesting to me. So going into the debate, North Carolina had Harris leading by an average of about 2%, depending on what poll you read, anywhere from like 1 to 3%, average of 2%. When I looked Thursday morning after that debate, they are in a dead heat at 46%. I thought it was really interesting to see that this gave Trump a lift in North Carolina, this debate. What were your thoughts about it?
Well, first of all, about the debate itself, I think you have to say that Kamala Harris was a winner in multiple respects. I think she was probably the winner of people watching and seeing what they were going to expect to see because Donald Trump.
She seemed more composed.
She was more composed. Donald Trump was kind of Donald Trump and doing Trumpy things, which up against Joe Biden made him look really good because Joe Biden just looked senile and not knowing where he was.
Right.
Whereas Kamala Harris, being composed and kind of sticking with her points, came across as a much more typical political figure that you'd expect from debates past. But I think the other thing that was clear to anyone watching this is that the ABC moderators were really out to get Trump on anything he said and just basically gave Kamala Harris a pass.
Right.
Anything she said that you might think, well, is that really true? They just said, okay, and bought it. But anything Trump said that seemed to not pass the smell test, they were like, well, what about this? What about this? And I think some people who don't really have a decision yet might look at that and go, well, why are the moderators being so much tougher on Trump?
Sure,
and that
sure.
might help him.
I did think it was interesting that she really went through the laundry list of left narratives about everything from Charlottesville to, I mean, name it. She really ticked down the
Trump
list.
tax,
The Trump tax.
which is what Biden talked about before. She was
Right.
following a lot of the stuff he talked about in the previous debate.
Yeah,
with
I
Trump.
thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
She really went down that list of these messaging things that David Muir didn't seem to address at all. And he seemed very ready for whatever Trump was going to say and not prepared at all for what he thought Harris might say. He was not ready to fact check her.
Maybe they just haven't updated their list of who the candidate is yet. They
Well,
still
that
think it's
could-
Joe Biden. Another thing that's similar to that, when you're talking about she just copying what Joe Biden had said in the past, we know that just before the debate, within a day or two, there's finally on Kamala Harris's website a list of policy positions.
Oh, interesting.
And now that it's there, people have gone through it and done the check
Yeah.
for plagiarism and found
Right.
that most of it seems to be copied and pasted from
Oh my
Joe
gosh.
Biden's policy
So
agenda.
painful. Right.
Yeah,
Oh
but
my
she really doesn't have a policy. Like a lot of the stuff, oh, I'm going to give you money to buy a house. I'm going to give you this and give you that.
Right,
They're
where's
all
that
the,
coming from?
They're
Yeah.
all the giveaways again.
Sure,
The
sure.
giveaways. And a really funny note about Biden, if you saw yesterday, it was making the rounds on social media. He was in Shanksville for the 9/11 memorial.
Yeah.
Someone in the audience gave him their Trump hat, and he put it on his head. And he
my
was
word.
smiling.
No.
So it's a funny little
You
like.
know his people just fell out. I saw
Yeah,
that.
he's like, okay, he's not
Yeah.
thinking too clearly, but
Right.
yeah, it was a
But
funny
the
little.
painful part was that Trump absolutely took every bait
He did.
that she put out there. And you could tell that she was rehearsed. What is going to get him back on his heels?
Right.
First, she walked straight across the stage, I thought, and met him almost behind his own podium and forced him to shake hands back. And that set him off, I think, from the very beginning. And she was practiced, and he baited every hook, and he took every one. That was painful to watch a little bit.
It was, but it's interesting to see that, as you mentioned, here in North Carolina, it doesn't seem to
It
have
does
had a
not.
positive impact for her, and if anything, maybe had a negative impact for her or positive impact for him,
You can
which
make-
North Carolina, we know, is going to be critical.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that also speaks to that the people who were watching knew what they were looking at. I
Right.
think that they are underestimated. I think voters, maybe particularly the voters that we've gotten to know so well by doing this, we can't underestimate. They know what they're looking at. They're listening for policy, and these are things affecting their family budgets in real time, and whether their kids are safe walking the streets, and all of these other things. And I think that we underestimate what their interpretation was.
And remember, this is September 10th when that debate
Sure.
took place. That's still well out before the election for
Right.
the people who are making last-minute decisions.
Right.
The people who will decide this election aren't paying attention yet.
Right.
They're not going to pay attention until it's like,
that's
it's
true.
time to go to the polls. Oh yeah, I guess I better make a decision. The people who are following now care.
Right.
And they're watching for that thing. They're watching, does Kamala Harris come across well, or does she come across like Julia Dreyfus's character on Veep with that strange cackle?
I actually
does,
remember her.
Yeah. Does Donald?
Jolene.
Yeah, she'd be more entertaining than
Yeah.
any of these politicians.
Yeah.
Does Donald Trump come across as typical Donald Trump, or is he
Right.
more presidential than even when he was president? So that's what people are watching for. Or are the moderators going to be in the tank for the Democrat, or are they going to be fair? The people who will really decide at the margins, they're not even paying any attention yet. They won't pay attention until it's like, oh, time to vote. Okay,
yeah.
who am I
Yeah.
voting for?
I think the biggest loser in all of it was ABC.
Yes.
ABC and David Muir, I think, were the biggest losers of this whole thing, because I don't see how another Republican goes on there in good faith.
Yeah, although it's interesting that Trump was on Fox the following morning, and someone said, well, what about a debate with Brett Baer and Martha McCallum? He goes, well, I don't know if I want them. How about Sean Hannity? So basically, he only wants a debate if it's
Right.
someone who is definitely in the tank for him.
Sure. Well, maybe we let him pick a moderator and let Harris pick a moderator, and then, they've each got their person.
That's right, and the other person chooses could be the one that
Right.
questions them.
But the most important thing that came out of this was Taylor
Right.
Swift's endorsement.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then she's a childless cat lady, and Travis
Right.
Kelce followed up because then Elon Musk said, "Well, I'll give you a baby," and
Sure.
Travis went
That
out and
was
said,
bizarre. Yeah.
"I'm going to
Yeah,
twist
that
you
was
in a
weird.
pretzel."
Yes, yeah. Katie,
like-
all right, you're the youngest among us. How powerful you think Taylor Swift's endorsement is?
I mean, unfortunately, I think that it really is powerful,
Really?
especially with some of the
interesting.
younger women. They really look up to her and
Okay.
pay attention to what that she says. So,
Very interesting.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do think that it holds some sway.
Wow. All
Yeah.
right. Maybe that's the Elon Musk of Democrats. I don't know.
Taylor Swift is certainly a force to be reckoned with, but I don't think it surprises anyone
Sure.
that she endorsed
Right.
Harris, because she endorsed Biden the last time
Right.
around, and has over the years come across as much more of a typical down the line Democrat.
Yeah. Her message just seems so painfully elitist.
Yes.
If you read it on Instagram, it was startling. I think you
Yeah.
realize what a bubble she really is in. All right, so Kamala Harris in town this week. I think North Carolina is certainly everybody's going to be pounding the pavement here.
Yeah, Charlotte and Greensboro. And I
Okay.
heard this morning that they were talking about, the debate obviously is the big news of the week, that there were no lines for her appearance today in Charlotte this
interesting.
morning. Trump has people get up, well, even overnight, they'll camp out
they
for a
tailgate,
rally.
yeah.
Yeah, and there were no lines this morning in Charlotte.
Okay.
So,
Very interesting. All right, now I'm going to come right back to you.
Sure.
We're talking about debates. I haven't heard word of a gubernatorial debate. It looks like we're not going to have one of those. And now we're not even going to have a lieutenant governor debate?
No.
All right, what's your story?
Yeah, so the news this week came out. Actually, Hal Weatherman, who's the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor, sent out a post, used to be tweet, on X this week saying, well, you know, we had one scheduled with my opponent, Rachel Hunt, a state senator from Mecklenburg County, but that her campaign notified us that she is not going to be doing it. She pulled out of it. They got word last week. And wanted to do a follow-up on that, see what was going on. So I guess there was a debate scheduled back in April with whoever the Republican candidate was going to be, because we still have the runoff coming up with Jim O'Neill and Hal Weatherman.
Sure.
That was set up by the North Carolina Institute of Political Leadership, IOPL, and Spectrum 1. It was going to take place in UNC Charlotte on September 17th. So I think next Wednesday, if I'm right with the date. But it was next week. And everything was a go. They sent out the emails for the two candidates' campaigns, said, yep, this is going to happen, it's going to happen. And then last week, an email was sent to IOPL from Hunt's campaign saying, no, we can't do it because, well, we never actually really agreed to this. And there was no other time we can do this during the rest of the campaign. So that was kind of interesting.
Okay.
Talked to Weatherman's campaign and said, we've had this on our calendar since April. We did a follow-up about specifics, what they're going to be doing with cameras and all this kind of stuff. And also followed up with IOPL, and they said, yeah, there's a preliminary agreement. We had this all set. Also, Hunt's campaign emailed me and said, well, no, again, we never agreed to this. There's nothing to pull out of, and that, Ms. Hunt's going to be going touring the state and talking about things that are important to her, to everybody, all the constituents across the state, and they're not going to debate Hal Weatherman, who's going to be telling conspiracy theories and anti-abortion issues.
So they took the opportunity to make their point.
To make their point that way. So her campaign actually also contacted me yesterday and said, you need to take a look at this because IOPL did agree of our pulling out. Not pulling out, whatever. He said, she said, whatever is going on, that we never agreed to this. So I did take a look at what they presented, and there was no clear evidence that IOPL said anything that they were not going to be doing this. I again followed up with IOPL, and they said no, and we do have the proof from Hunt's campaign that said that they were agreeing to this back in April. They agreed all along to it. So it's he said, she said, but there is no proof that they never agreed to it.
But in the end, it means that voters don't get to hear from them.
That's right. I mean, aside from the presidential debate, which we didn't know if that was going to happen, up until a few weeks ago. I think debates are losing a lot of favor with candidates. They just, and as Hal Weatherman said in the end of my story, there's a clear divide between our two campaigns. I'm willing to go out to all the 100 counties and meet with people, talk unfiltered, ask them questions, what they really are concerned about, and she's there, covering up and concealing or being I'm paraphrasing, being in a bubble. Everything's scripted. Everything is it's carefully scripted, and those were his words. So it's, who loses out are the voters in this.
Exactly. Well, Mitch, I mean, from a strategic standpoint, you and I have both been in news media for a long time. Does a candidate really win by heading into a debate? I mean, it seems like you can, hurt your campaign and you can succeed, but if you can control your message through TikTok and Instagram and controlled speeches and teleprompters, it's safer, right?
Yeah, debate is a risk.
Yeah,
Now, if you are going to be in a debate with someone who is a terrible debater, and you can walk rings around them and make people think better of you and think worse of the other person, then you would take it. But if it's going to be a toss-up, then you run the risk of saying something that's going to hurt you more than saying something or having the other person say something that's going to hurt them. And so especially if you think you're going to win big, there's no reason to do a debate. We've seen that in North Carolina politics recently with Ted Budd not wanting to do anything in the Senate race. Other times when the Republican candidate has clearly been the leader, Mark Robinson not wanting to debate any of the other candidates for governor this time around. If you have a big lead and you are pretty sure you're going to win, why hurt that by going into a debate? In this case, I'm surprised that Rachel Hunt's team didn't come up with a better excuse.
Right.
Like, oh, well, we were interested in doing this, but we ended up having to do this
Right.
other thing, rather than just,
feel like
we
it,
didn't
yeah.
agree to it, and we've got other stuff we're going to do.
Yeah, they may not have realized it would take on a life of its own like this.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
and it's interesting because we know IOPL, which
Mm-hmm.
is a group that deals with candidates and prospective candidates and prospective campaign
On both
managers
sides of the
on
aisle.
both sides
Yeah,
of the aisle.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
They're about training people to be interested in the political process. They've been doing this for a number of election
Sure.
cycles with these races that are a little bit further down the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
IOPL, as far as I know, hasn't ever really tried to do a Senate or a gubernatorial debate because
No,
they figure
it's
others are doing that. But
Very
they're
well
trying-
respected organization for years.
And that's what he wanted me to say too. The person I spoke
Sure.
with, he said, they're nonpartisan. They're like straight down.
Absolutely.
They just want to do this, like you said, to get it out to the
No,
voters.
they are not mudslingers.
Right.
It really is. They've been around for a long time doing this.
Right, and they're trying to publicize these races that
Right.
are further down
Sure.
the ballot that otherwise wouldn't get attention, like lieutenant governor.
Right.
Right. Very interesting. So in our latest poll in Carolina Journal, in that race for the lieutenant governor, Hal Weatherman is ahead. So it's interesting that he's ready to debate and she doesn't want to, because this could be a chance for her to get out there in front of people.
And potentially it's a sign that we're seeing some changes in the polls because you mentioned that was the last
That was the
Carolina
last
Journal
one.
poll, but that's been out a little while ago,
Yeah,
and now
it's
it's
been-
next week
Right.
that we'll have the
another one.
latest Carolina Journal poll that will have all of the Council of State races, and perhaps Hunt and her team are seeing more recent polling that's
Interesting.
more favorable to them, because we have seen in polls since our last Carolina Journal poll came out, Josh Stein with what seems to be
Yeah.
unrealistic double-digit lead over Mark Robinson. I saw a poll recently that has now Jeff Jackson with a several-point lead over Dan Bishop when they had been neck and neck before. Maybe Hunt is seeing some things showing
be.
her with a lead and saying, well, I don't want to chance that. Let's not jinx it.
Sure. All right, well, we're going to have the latest on that Carolina Journal poll coming in Thursday, so make sure you don't miss it, and check out carolinajournal.com for all the latest stories and news that we've been talking about here. Thanks so much for joining us.